I'm Tim Monroe, and this is what I really want to talk about. There's something fascinating about every single one of us. Everybody has a passion and a story to tell, something that lights them up. Every week I sit down with interesting people and we talk about the things that really matter to them and to all of us. It might be funny, it might be weighty, it might be weird. It's what I really want to talk about. I'm talking today with Dr. Emmanuel Joshua Stokes, better known as EJ. Dr. Stokes is appointed Director of the Office of Convocations at Bera College in July 2024, serving as the Artistic Administrator of Berea's Distinguished Lecture Program and the Stevenson Memorial Concert Series. A native of Morristown, New Jersey, and a proud Appalachian, Dr. Stokes brings a deep appreciation for the region's rich musical and cultural traditions to his work. In his primary faculty appointment as Assistant Professor of Music, he serves as Bera College's resident musicologist, teaching a diverse range of courses in music appreciation, American music, global music, and musical theater, as well as the music history sequence for majors and minors. He also serves as a conductor and artistic director of Bera College's award-winning and amazing gospel choir, the Black Music Ensemble, better known as BME. Additionally, Dr. Stokes is an affiliate faculty member in the Departments of African and African American Studies and Theater. A graduate of Bera College, so came back home to teach, Dr. Stokes earned his Bachelor of Arts degrees right here in music. Dr. Stokes holds graduate degrees in musicology from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where he got his PhD. His research explores the intersections of gospel music, sacredness, and secularity, with a broader interest in how Black musical traditions shape cultural and artistic expression. Wow. Welcome, EJ. What do you really want to talk about today?
Hi, I want to talk about beloved community and what I call life lanterns, the folks that light up your world, that you connect with, and that illuminate the dark moments.
Excellent. Beloved community and life lanterns. This is going to be, I'm anticipating one of the deeper conversations that I've had, so I'm really looking forward to it. But before we do that deep dive into beloved community, talk a little bit about your work here at Bera, and maybe a little bit about your musical journey, and so how you got, how you went from wherever you started that musical journey to where you are now.
Okay, so I am here at Bera. As you mentioned, I direct the Convocations program, serving as an artistic director, and I'm really kind of a transitional director. I'm in it for a short window.
Okay.
And then my home area is the music department, where I teach our music history sequence for majors. I teach general population music courses in music literature, in musical theater. I direct some of our musicals here at the college. We just did La Cage a year ago. We did Urinetown. We just did, what's the name of the show? It just slipped out. Ride the Cyclone.
Okay.
Yes, which was absolutely wonderful and a lot of fun to do. So that's kind of the broader thing that I do. And then in my day-to-day, I'm the director of the Black Music Ensemble, as you mentioned, which is one of our older student organizations on campus. It was founded in 1969 by a group of students who are actually quite still active in our alumni community, to provide a space for African American students to sing, to bring music from their home communities to our college campus. And the group has sustained through a lot of really challenging moments, the popularity and waning of gospel music at different times, and the pandemic when we were doing gospel choir over Zoom.
Right. Yeah,
which was a colorful moment. Yes.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. I don't want to do it again.
Yeah.
But we really get to do a deep dive into what it is to build community in those spaces. So we'll talk more about that. My background in this goes back to when I was 3. As you'll hear with a lot of gospel musicians, their parents put them in either some kind of instrument or put them in choir. And so when I was 3, they put me up in the choir stand with the other kids and said, "Okay, you sing now." And that's how I got started.
Was this a church?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this was in church choir. I grew up, as you mentioned, in Morristown, Tennessee. I am a very proud Appalachian. And you'll hear that as I talk. But I grew up in a really close-knit community, a community that's actually was founded the same year as Berea, 1855. And we, in that community, in our church community, we had a really awesome youth group and youth leaders who developed our children's choir, our youth choir. And so I started singing in the choir at the age of 3. My mom jokes that I actually started in it younger than that because when I was a baby, they used me as baby Jesus in the Christmas pageant. But the actual singing came a little bit later. And then at the age of 9, because it's gospel music is taught by ear, taught by rote, I became the student director of the choir. And that's how I got into directing.
So this goes back a really long time.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Which I think is common for people who do what you do. So let's jump into beloved community. And as we do that, I think we need to, I don't know if it's define is the right word, but when you say beloved community, what exactly does that mean to you?
For me, beloved community, and I use this phrasing in my research a lot, but it's a vision of a world shaped by justice, love, and mutual care. It's the community where you belong, and that belonging isn't conditional. It's where you feel always included, accepted, and as Bell Hooks says, our uniqueness is honored, right? It's not a term that's original to me by any means. It has a long history, really. There's the earliest credit of the term is given to a Harvard theologian named Josiah Royce. But the concept has evolved a lot since then, mostly due to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and our late professor here, Bell Hooks, who really kind of unpacked this idea. Martin Luther King really saw it as a call to action, not just a utopic idea, but a way of engaging, connecting, and being that required kinship of all people. His language for it was the brotherhood of men, right? But the connecting of people.
Yeah, and so this idea, I think a lot of people think of this as sort of you use the word utopian, I think, but as like a utopian, almost like abstract ideal that's kind of out there. But I think you think, and I think Dr. King also thought, that wasn't the case, that this was actually an achievable state. Does that fit with what you think?
Yes, it's an achievable state, and it's an always driving force, a thing that we're trying to continually get to because it's easy to wane from, right? And he thought of it as a very kind of global concept, this idea that we are needing to have justice and equity on every level, and the idea that we would be a global community. Bell's work really kind of hones it even more so to talk about beloved community on local levels and on education levels, these intimate spaces that allow folks to connect and come together in what she really talks about as being love, what it means to have this compassionate want to see others succeed and be. And so I oftentimes explain to people that when I talk about beloved community, I'm talking about it on 2 levels. One being this greater overarching universal beloved community, but then also this narrative of local beloved community where the action really happens, that helps achieve that kind of global, more abstract, if you will.
So a lot of people listening may know a lot about Bell Hooks, but some may not. So talk a little about who was Bell Hooks, what was her, a lot of people, Berea, she taught at Berea, but who was Bell Hooks?
Well, to me, she was a neighbor. I was fortunate to have shared office space as a student worker here at Berea when we both came here the same year. She came as a distinguished professor in residence the same year. I came as a first-year student. But Bell Hooks is a critically acclaimed and celebrated feminist author, writer, and social critic of the 20th century who really challenged all of us to think about what feminism is, what love is, and what it means to be and to become in new ways or in revisited ways, I think. She wrote one text, and my first text coming in contact with her work was called Feminism is for Everybody. And it really unpacked the ideas of what it means for everyone to have equitable opportunity and to break down the structure of a patriarchal capitalist society that really limits everybody, including the men who are part of the patriarchy. It puts them into a box as well. So her work really broke down those ideas and challenged all of us to think differently, to exist differently, and to simply be different in a way that celebrates our uniqueness, celebrates our heritage, celebrates our spaces, while also carving out space for us to have our identities.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things of this is you sent me some notes before that I just looked at with so much interest and did a little more research myself on this idea. But I think one of the ideas here is that belonging, the idea of belonging to a beloved community, has no conditions. There's no it's everybody, it's anybody. There's no conditions, and that sense of belonging and love belongs to everyone. Is that sort of how you feel about that?
I do. And it's interesting because belonging is actually how my work started, unintentionally. What happened, it's a crazy story, really. I had graduated from here at Berea, and I was hired to come back in the role of an interim sabbatical replacement choir director for the ensemble for BME. And so I mentioned the choir a little bit earlier, but it's an ensemble that sings gospel music from the African American Christian tradition. And the group has been always open to everyone to participate, but that still means that typically folks had kind of had some sort of alignment with that. And it was my first year working here, and there was a young man, and he knows that I tell this story. He's given me permission. I actually recount it in my dissertation. But there was a young man who came into audition, and I'll use very crass language. That was the language I used at the time. I was very young. But he was, and I give the caveat of self-identifying as a researcher. He was a self-identifying white male gay atheist who was auditioning for the predominantly Black Christian-based gospel choir.
Yeah.
And he sang a show tune to audition. And and I said, okay, why do you want to be in BME? Which is a question we ask everyone.
Yeah.
And his answer was really succinct, and he was very committed to it. He simply said, it's where I belong. These are my people.
Nice.
And I thought, wow, what does this mean?
Yeah.
How does this group, how does this moment, how does this music experience transcend all of these differences that I immediately populated in my head that mean nothing to him, at least not in the way that I would think they would.
Right.
And it was about belonging and unpacking what that meant. And that's how my work started. The whole reason I even went through and have a master's and a doctorate is because of trying to answer that question of belonging.
Yeah, and you know, just to sort of move that point a little bit further, and your work with the BME, anyone who's ever seen the Berea Black Music Ensemble perform, I think almost viscerally feels that sense that those kids who are singing together, first of all, they're having a great time. Like, that's number one, right? They seem to be really joyful. But secondly, there's this sense of community I think they have with each other, where they all feel like they belong to this particular group. And it just comes through. But one quote you sent me from Bell Hooks, she said, "To begin by always thinking of love as an action rather than a feeling."
Yes.
Which is interesting. So talk about that. I mean, either as it relates to beloved community or as it relates to your work with the BME here at Berea, however you think about that, because I think that's kind of the really important point here, that love is just not something you feel, it's something you do.
Right.
Right?
Love is an action. It's a call to action. At the church I attend, we say love demands, right? It asks you to do something. It challenges you. And I think that's really what the spaces of belonging do. They provide love by challenging you to be, to do, to act, to engage. And that's the thing we do in the choir. We work very hard to cultivate a space where everyone can be a part. Literally, one of the things that my director, when I was a student in the choir, used to always say to everyone is, only you have your voice. Only you can sing your song. Only you can tell your story. And if you walk, you dance. If you talk, you sing. You have to actively be a part. It can't just happen around you, which is in many ways the history of gospel music. It's a participatory music. We call it Gospel 101 when we work with people to say everyone has to be involved.
Yeah.
It's not just an audience that's in the dark and a choir that's on stage.
Yes.
The idea is that we give energy to you, you give energy in return. It's a community of reciprocity. The idea that engagement is necessary.
Right.
And that engagement is what then creates the ethos of belonging.
Yeah.
The idea that you plug in.
And I think the idea of love is an active, an action, not just a feeling. Like you can think about, oh, I'm in love with somebody, and that's sort of a feeling.
Right.
But to be to use love as an action, I think really fits in with, the Brea College founder, John G. Fee, who used this idea of what he called impartial love.
Right.
Right. Meaning you can't just love yourself and those around you. It has to be everyone. It's everyone or no one, I think, is sort of the idea. You have to love everyone.
Yes.
And that takes, I think, a tremendous amount of intentionality.
Oh, yes.
Right? So talk about that. Like, how is that reflected in your work here?
One of the things I said to the language I use, and I've actually talked to married couples about this too, when we talk about falling in love, is that it requires intentionality. You have to fall in love with that person selectively every day. You have to actually put the work in because every day we're anew. And so in that same way, there's this active process of engagement and intentionality that becomes really difficult sometimes,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
I had a student when I mentioned that I was going to be coming on this podcast and I was sharing that I was going to talk about beloved community. He said, how did he put it? He said, how do you engage in beloved community when you don't like everybody?
Right.
Right. What does that mean? And I said that beloved community does not call us to intimacy, right? It doesn't call us to be necessarily chummy with everyone, but it calls us to integrity. It calls us to treat everyone with dignity. It calls us to engage respectfully. One of the things that I tell folks is that this work for me is grounded in seeing people as people. I think oftentimes we can get frustrated and put people in boxes and they're not my problem. They're not this, that. Yeah. But the truth is everyone means something to somebody.
Right.
And if you can remind yourself of that, it helps you to think of them and see them with integrity, even if you're not engaging and existing in the intimacy of it, because it requires intention.
It does. I think, what I think is a lot of people don't understand. And I'm not saying, we're so good at this or anything like that. I'm saying it takes a tremendous amount of time and commitment and thinking about it every day to engage in impartial love or this idea of love in action and not just saying, oh yeah, I love everybody. That's not good enough.
Right.
It has to be accompanied by the way you live, right? Every day. Yeah. So, talk a little bit about, I'm very, I love the BME, as you know, I every time I can, I go see them sing. And there's such an energy there that's just palpable to everybody in the room. And you said it's reciprocity. It's going back and forth. And there are many times when you are, I'm trying to think of the right word, as you're conducting, you seem to be taken over.
Yes.
Right? Talk about that. What happens in those moments?
Oh, my.
And it's probably hard to define, right?
It is, well, yes. Me at a loss for words on a podcast.
Yeah.
I will say, let me back up and say, one of the thing that I think helps create that energy starts in rehearsal, right? It starts in rehearsal. My teaching philosophy, I am a millennial, right? Or as they call a kid of the Oprah Winfrey Show generation.
Right.
And when I was younger, there was an episode of the Oprah Winfrey Show where she had Toni Morrison on. And Toni Morrison was talking about raising her children. And she said that when her children would come into the room, she would scowl because she was looking at them to make sure their clothes were just clean and buttoned and all that. And her children started to embody the scowl. What's wrong with me? Why are you looking at me that way? What did I do wrong now? And she said, so she had to recognize that for them, love in action meant that her face lit up when they came into the room, that they were valued, that they were seen. And she talked about the fact that really in her work, what she's learned is that's what everybody wanted. And so that became the core tenet of my teaching philosophy. When I walk into the classroom, the goal is that everyone simply feels seen where they are, as they are, because they exist. That is my love in action. And we have it started out as something that I would just say to affirm the students that has become a choir motto of sorts. It's even on the back of our T-shirts. And it says, in case no one told you today, you matter. Just because you're you. And creating that ethos of affirming that by being you, that action is enough really leads us to a space where we can move from just love as an action into love as a feeling. And I would say the thing that you get to see in the context of concert when I'm conducting really is that love moving from an action into feeling. And it tends to be very overwhelming and ecstatic. To the point that I jokingly tell people there's not a moment during our concert where I'm not crying in some capacity. But it's tears of joy. It's tears of love and appreciation for the opportunity to get to build beloved community with these students.
Is any of that when you're ecstatic, as you said? And some of the kids are too. Like you can watch them up there. You can see them sort of being taken away. Is any of that connected to you in a religious sense or a spiritual way?
Very much so.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing for me is that I don't necessarily perceive sacredness and secularity as existing separately. I think we've created these concepts of this is sacred, right? Church is sacred. This is hallowed ground. This is secular. This is Walmart, right? This is school. This is these places. I don't think it's that clear cut. I think part of love makes these spaces sacred. Part of community makes these spaces sacred when you are with people that you connect with, that you're honoring, that you're holding light for, right? That becomes a sacred space, even if it is this booth we're in, or if it is the cereal aisle at the grocery store. That can be a sacred space where connection happens, where faith can bloom, however one might understand divinity. For me, my understanding of faith in God is very liberal, right? And I think that the way I describe it to people is I very much understand all of us as being energetic beings. And because I'm a musician, I think of things as existing in harmony. And these moments of ecstatic worship, of ecstatic praise, and of ecstatic community are the moments when our energies are harmonious. When we're really, to think of, Plato, Aristotle, when we vibrate together as everything in the universe is humming.
And one thing you said a lot of things, but one thing you talked about was this idea of, there are two things that really struck me. One is that those actions, the action of love at some point sort of crosses over some kind of firmament or membrane. It becomes a feeling. Right. And that feeling can be overwhelming. But in order for that to happen, right, I think there has to be an openness to it, a receptivity to it. And that, again, doesn't necessarily come naturally to everyone. Right? I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about. I wouldn't experience it the same way you would or anyone else would. We're all different, right? But I've definitely had moments where you feel this sense, and sometimes watching the BME, I feel this way, where what was happening becomes an emotional
Right.
experience, right? And you either cry, or you laugh, or you sing, or you get up and clap, or whatever it is, right? And I think this is really important for the concept of beloved community. How do we create that openness in people? How do people become receptive to that idea?
The short answer is seeing them, being with them, and sitting with them, even in the dark moments. That's where I think being life lanterns becomes a thing. Life lanterns is not a term you can Google that you're going to find anything on
That's your
unless
term.
it provides my dissertation for you. But it's the term that I created for talking about the people who hold up the light to allow us to see ourselves, to find ourselves in the dark moments, to celebrate ourselves, and to reflect other light, right? To celebrate with us when we celebrate. I think that's the work that takes us to that space, is finding ways to be light, to find the people who share that light. And I feel like to say be light feels very amorphous, but it's the moment where people are intentional in sharing joy, in seeing the best in folks, meeting them where they are, recognizing that everybody is not healed yet, that they're dealing with challenges and difficulties, and still being able to affirm their humanity.
Yeah.
That going back to that idea of being in community means integrity. You're seeing their dignity as people.
Yeah.
And I think allowing people to know that you see them allows them to be more open to be seen.
Yeah, that's such an important point, and I think that I don't want to get too sort of weird here, but I think that the intentionality, and especially for I'm a middle-aged plus white guy, straight white guy, right? And my advice to other people like me is to put yourself in positions, put yourself in environments where you can be with people who aren't like you,
Right.
and do it as much as you can,
Right.
right? And that, I think, is the intentionality of creating a community like this. I remember listening. I heard Senator Raphael Warnock from Georgia speak, and he said, "I have sat where they sit." It
Yes.
was one of the phrases he uses, meaning I don't just sort of think about these people. I go hang out with them.
Right.
I spend time with them.
Right.
Whether it's the poor or people in this community who need help, or people in the community who just aren't like him. Right? Maybe he was talking about hanging out with rural white folks in Georgia.
Right.
I'm not sure. But that idea is that you're very intentional about spending time with people who are different than you, not like you necessarily, because I really believe this. Once you have done that, and these are neighbors and these are people you've spent time with, it's very hard to hate someone
Yes.
who you've hung out with. Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
very much so.
Yeah.
I jokingly tell people that my family has no ends and no bounds because we are always going and growing. Because we will enter these spaces. We will go connect with people wherever they are. And I tell folks when it comes to the choir, that means I'm going to sporting events I know nothing about, right? I am not very good in the sense that I know nothing about baseball.
Yeah.
But if one of the students says, hey, I'm in a baseball game, come see us. Okay. If there's a softball tournament and I can make it to it, I'm watching softball.
I can help you with that.
But whatever the thing is that means something to them, right? A space where you can connect, finding common ground. One of the things that I started doing is holding my office hours in a local coffee shop. And it's because I recognized that sometimes having a desk between us functioned as the greatest schism and divide.
Right, or just being in that sort of academic setting,
Right.
that building. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So finding ways to meet them where they are that put us on a community level, right? The idea that we're here together, not me in my throne and you down in your small seat, but rather us being mutual in our engagement and connecting in that very real earthen kind of way.
Yeah. One way Cheryl, my wife, and I do that is we invite students to our home to cook. and we give them the recipe and we say, here you go. There might be like a dozen kids. Here's the recipe. Here are all the ingredients. You guys got to make dinner. And if you don't make it, we don't eat, right? We're not going to cook. We supervise, make sure
Right.
it's done. But like, it's the most amazing thing because they enter this space where they're like, oh, okay. And they just sit down together. Some know how to cook, some don't. They choose what they want to do. They're going to chop, they're going to cook, they're going to fry, whatever. And it becomes this really interesting relationship, not just with Cheryl and me, but with each other.
Right.
Where they're like, everyone's kind of the same in this room.
Yes.
It's someone's house. It's not a classroom. It's not, it's someone's house. And it really has been powerful for us. Like, we've just loved it. I think the kids like it too, but frankly, I just love it. I think it's great. We need to do more of it. So you talked a little bit about this idea of life lanterns, and I know that was something that was part of your dissertation and your work.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Like, how did you come up with that idea?
Well, what happened is when I was interviewing people for my dissertation, so the title of my diss is taken from a gospel song, and the title of it says, I Need You to Survive, Constructing Community. And really talking to folks about how their gospel communities happened. They would talk about these people that they had worked with or that they had studied under or that had really taught them something. And you would see the sparkle in their eyes, right? You would see the light and you go, okay, this person means a lot to them. How do we talk about these people in a way that just really kind of conceptualizes the role that they play? One of my former students, I posted on Facebook before I came a couple of days ago, and I said, I'm going to talk about community. What are things that you would like to say? And I mentioned that I was going to talk about beloved community and life lanterns. And one of the students said, I always call them my shiny people, my shiny people. And it's because these really are the people that reflect the light. And so hearing people talk about these folks and thinking about my own, right? I had a theater teacher in high school who very much illuminated for me the fact that I am possibly one of the most theatrical people you will ever meet. But having her illuminate that and celebrate it really helped set me on my path. And getting to honor folks like her and to see these people and say, who are the people who illuminate your world? These are where you start modeling community. This is where you start learning community. We don't learn community from folks that make us sad or make us miserable or or whose actions cause us to feel those ways.
It's amazing too, I think, as you go through life, and you look back, how many of those life lanterns, as you say, have been teachers. Have been, teachers that you've had throughout the years who have maybe seen something in you that maybe you didn't even know yourself.
Right.
Or other people weren't necessarily recognizing, and took the time to even just say it, recognize it, So who were some of those people in your life? Like, who were your life lanterns?
Oh, my.
There's probably a lot, but.
Yes, it's...
Who's your Mount Rushmore of life lanterns?
Oh, the Mount Rushmore question. I just learned of this question the other day. My goodness. I would dare say my mom is one of those folks. She's a star. She lives 3 hours away and makes it to all of the choir concerts, no matter what. So she also makes it to the musicals that I work with, and she's come to a few of my classes, and she gives me pointers afterwards and tells me when I'm boring. So, so my mom is one of those folks. I would dare say that even though I didn't get to know him in a real way, one of the folks whose words always kind of illuminate my path is, and in fact, our founder, John G. Fee. I read his autobiography over Christmas break last year, and being able to read the words of someone who blazed the trail that I've gotten to follow really was impactful in a way that I didn't know what to do with.
So for those who may not know, who are not Berea people who are listening to this, John G. Fee was an abolitionist minister who founded Berea College in 1855 and brought together white students, black students, men and women at a time when that was radical at the time. And there was a lot of struggles, with doing that. But here we are, 100 and however many years later, 175 years, something like that later, still with the same mission and the same idea of equity. When people ask me about him, I often say he's like John Brown without the guns.
Yes.
Yeah.
He took a bit more of a peaceable approach.
Yeah.
I would say that my best friend is one of those people. She is absolutely a solid rock in my world who has, and I tell her this often, she believed in me when I didn't believe in me.
Yeah.
And especially for those of you who do higher ed, right? The moments where completing a thesis or a dissertation or an honors paper feels impossible. Having someone who goes, you can do this, just buckle down, keep pressing, persevere. She's one of those people as well. So I have some really amazing star players that have helped me to form these ideas and have been part of the journey of me finding them in others as well.
I think Life Lanterns is such a great idea, and maybe you should do something more about it, like trademark it or something,
Right.
It's such a great idea. It's such a great way to describe things. Another thing you said, which I also found sort of really interesting and would like to explore a little bit, is this idea that you talked about you didn't feel a huge division between spirituality and secularity.
Yes.
And I have similar feelings in that vein. So talk about what you mean by that.
So I've studied a lot of music at this point in my life, right? And so my understanding of sacredness and secularity starts with music and the idea that some music was okay for the church and some wasn't, and what that means. But I very much understand our way of being as sacred and divine. Everything that we do, everything that we are, is a part of divinity. And as such, you can't really separate these aspects of our being completely. Yeah. Now, I will say some things are a little more secular or a little more sacred, right? We're not taking communion at the nightclub. But the idea that things are just one or just the other doesn't seem plausible to me. Right. When especially if you're thinking about community. The idea that no one exists solely in this world or this world. I'm reminded of a phrase that you would hear in the South, where folks would say that someone was so heavenly minded they were no earthly good, right? Mm-hmm. Which really puts them in the sacred camp and forgets about secularity. Right. But then we have the folks that they would say, well, they've never been to church, they know nothing. Right. They would be put in that category. And so then they were being dumped into secular and having nothing to do with sacredness. And I just don't believe those differences are plausible. I think that we're much more integrated, we're much more complex, and we're supposed to be. Yeah. I think that's part of what is magic of being human, of being alive. I think I say being alive because I also think in some ways that magical divinity exists in our pets and our furry friends. Yeah,
I really vibrate with that. I for years I attended a Unitarian church in New England, and people would ask me what that's all about, and I'd say, well, I think the best way to describe it is it's the worship of secular humanism, right?
Yes.
But then, having lived here now for a couple of years, those ideas are becoming much more integrated for me in that there is a Christian tradition here at Berea, but there's also lots of other faith traditions too. Yes. And I'm feeling more and more the sort of transcendence of all that, and integrating that with this idea that, we're really all about the secular, and we want to be we want to be humanistic, of course. Right. But there's also a sense of divinity, as you use the word, that is becoming more and more integrated into the way I think about all that, which is kind of cool. Yeah. It feels good. There's something, and when I feel it maybe more than any other time is when I'm at a BME concert.
Well, and I think that space is really dynamic for it and well-versed for it because our students come from so many different faith walks. We have students who do identify with Christianity. We we have students for whom hearing the phrase or the term Christianity makes them skittish.
Yeah.
Right. Which is how I actually moved into using the terminology divinity,
Right.
a phrase that, a phraseology that helps everyone meet in the middle. But we've had students who are Muslim, we've had students who are Buddhist, and students who are agnostic and atheist. But they coalesce around this music that has a spiritual tradition. So you have this very sacred music existing in this traditionally secular space, with all of these different backgrounds and experiences coalescing. And I think that's what really makes it a magical moment. And magic is the only word I know to describe it. I haven't come up with a new term for that yet. But the what is the word that they oftentimes talk about, the melting pot, right? I think that's the moment where our melting pot really becomes a nice smooth fondue.
Yeah. Well, I think too that the idea that, and this is, to try to kind of extend this musical metaphor, that all those people coming together from different backgrounds and then lifting their voices to sing,
Yes.
And all coming together in this way that is so resonant,
Yes.
right? And it couldn't be that way if all of those voices weren't different and
Right.
yet coming together. It's by definition a beloved community in that sense,
Yes.
right? I think, yeah.
And that's how I ended up leaning into this terminology and learning about it, is because I had to find a way to understand these choirs,
Right.
and recognizing that a lot of work hadn't been done with them. So trying to find a social theory framework to put them in, I said, am I going to have to invent one?
Right.
What exists? And I kept coming back to beloved community. When I was a first-year student, going back to Belle's work, she did a seminar in our main academic building, the Draper building, in the big conference room. And it was my first time being in a classroom where, yes, there was someone who was leading the discussion, but it was a true seminar where everyone was having an engaged conversation. And it was early in the morning. And so there were students who were participating, there were faculty who were participating, there were staff who were participating, but we were actually doing the community thing that Belle writes about in her books, and being in. It was the first time I had an instructor say to me to call them by their first name. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. No, I can't do that.
Yeah.
But it was because they were opening the door for me to exist in community in a wholehearted way. And that being able to source back to that moment and say, oh, wow, this is what we're doing in choir.
Right.
We are actively working, we're doing the practicing and the singing and the posture and the to create music, but more so to embody love, right? There are some moments at the early part of the semester, our pianist, Pastor David, and I, we joke that by the end of the rehearsal, the spirit is great and the people are very enthusiastic, and we finally made a chord, right? Early in the term when we're learning new music and that kind of thing, that's the accomplishment. We harmonized for a moment.
Does that come first? I mean, does the sort of the community, the love, the feeling, the vibration, does that come first before the music becomes great, or is it the other way around?
In my experience, and there may be choir directors out there who are listening who will disagree and they'll perceive it differently. But in my experience, and also what we prioritize is community first.
Yeah.
It is about being together, being what we call a family in many ways, being that harmonious group of spirits that then become harmonious voices.
Right.
So our first goal every semester is not to have a song that is pristine and put together. Our first goal is to have a community building night. Where we have food and we're going around saying, hey, tell me your name. What's your major? What do you like to do? What brings you joy? Where are you from? Tell somebody else these things, right? I also oftentimes tell the students, look at your neighbor and ask your neighbor their name. But for us, it very much is the building blocks, the foundation of a community of people, of hearts, of spirit, before it's a community of voices.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm no expert in this area, but I would assume that most choir directors start in the opposite way. Like, let's learn how to. How can you all read music? Do you know these notes? Do you know how these chords work? And then maybe that creates community. I don't know, but it's very clear that that's the emphasis for you and for the BME. And again, I think it goes back to this idea of, in order to create a beloved community, you need to be acting all the time. You need to be very intentional. It doesn't just happen.
No, I oftentimes refer to it as community curation. The idea that you're having to always think holistically. You're not, and this goes back to both Dr. King and Bell Hook's work in thinking, what is best for us as a group? What is best for the overarching community, and what helps us move together?
Yeah.
There's a story about some children who were playing a game, right? And the goal is that one of the children wins the prize at the end. If they win the race, the students are in a line, the children are in a line and they're running. Whoever gets there first gets to have the prize, which is like a candy bar. And in telling the children this, instead the children link arms and they walk together and then they split the candy, right? That kind of thing. And that's the way that I believe we have to approach any space like this, because a choir doesn't just happen, right? This is not a community that just organically forms. These people don't just live together and like, like, that's not the way that it works. We're intentionally saying, let's come together and do a thing. We find a common ground, the idea that we all want to sing. But before we really dig into it, it's about curating a space where people feel safe to be who they are.
Right. And, you talked about starting to sing in a church choir when you were 3 years old.
Yes.
So you're coming out of this Black sacred tradition. I'm
Yes.
assuming it was a Black church. Maybe.
It was.
Okay.
Well, predominantly so, yes.
I shouldn't assume, but I assumed it was. And so you're coming out of what might be called this Black sacred tradition. How does that then play out in the choir today? Is that a big part of this? Do the students feel that? Do they understand that tradition? Or is it just, kind of there if they want it?
We work very actively and intentionally to make sure that they understand where the music comes from. Yeah. We have conversations about the differences in faith styles and faith traditions.
Right.
And we typically try at least once a semester to perform or to sing, if you don't want to think of it as performance, in a church service, so that they get to experience being in the space where this music is birthed and where the tradition comes from. I have to give the caveat that my own choir experience is a little different than probably a lot of people's. I'm from rural Appalachia, and although the church comes out of the African American tradition, it was very diverse. And there's a darling YouTube video from a little show that the news in my hometown area used to do, where they interviewed some senior community members, and they were asking them about racism growing up in that area back in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. And they said, well, there was no need for racism. We were all poor, so we needed each other. And so it highlights that kind of community. So I grew up in this really kind of diverse space in this really diverse church, but I was also related to most of the people because it's a small town. So my choir director was my aunt.
Okay.
My fellow choir members were my cousins. So the community, the fellowship, the seeing you as a person part had already been done. So that was the approach that I have always brought to the space, is making it feel like you're with your cousins that you look forward to seeing at Thanksgiving and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that really sets us up. But again, going back into the spaces where the tradition was birthed, we take a moment in our rehearsals and say, this is where this music comes from. Yeah. This is who wrote it. Or we'll ask them, what do these lyrics mean?
Yeah.
What does it mean to say, God has smiled on me, right? Which is one of our favorite perennial songs. We sing it every semester. What does it mean for someone? And we ask the students, if you don't believe in God, what does this song mean to you? and holding space for everyone to get to experience it how they experience it.
Yeah, and to be clear, the Black Music Ensemble is relatively diverse. I mean,
Yes.
there's Black kids, white kids, kids from other countries, and so they may or may not have bumped against the sort of
Yes.
Black church tradition. A lot of the kids have, but maybe a lot of them haven't. So, yeah.
We're usually about 55 members every semester. There is typically no less than 7 to 12 countries represented.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, it's people of all different ethnicities, walks of life, orientations, identities, and journeys, truly.
Yeah. So this has been a great conversation, EJ. I really appreciate you coming in here.
Thank
so
you.
In order to kind of close the loop on,
Yes.
on everything here, here we are at Bera College, which, in my opinion, it's close. It's the closest to a beloved community.
Yes.
I think that I've experienced in my lifetime. And how does that feel for you? I mean, you're a graduate here. You came back to teach here. What is it that has sustained you and made you think about like this beloved community can really come true?
Honestly, the thing that brought me back was the choir. Being able to cultivate community sacred space that's open to students, that's open to faculty, that's open to staff, that's open to community members, where we get to affirm one another, where we look each other in the eye and say, you matter. Who you are, as you are, you matter. Being here, being you means something. And to be in a community, in a town, at a school that embraces that idea of wanting to affirm through love, through kindness, really is the joy of a lifetime. I always tell my students it's the honor of a lifetime to get to stand before them, to conduct and to serve. And that's how I feel about being at Berea.
Oh, that's so great. And as I mentioned before, one of the real cornerstones of Berea is this idea of impartial love. And
Yes.
I think you and your work here is one of the great embodiments of all of that. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, EJ. What I Really Want to Talk About is produced and recorded in the studios of Bera College News and Radio in Berea, Kentucky. You can learn more about this podcast and listen to all of the previous episodes at whatIreallyWantToTalkAbout.com. My contact information is on the website, so please get in touch with me if there is something that you really want to talk about. I'm Tim Monroe. Thanks for listening.